very, very interesting case who doesn't really fit into a normal classification of diabetes. And we always talk about how obesity is a major problem as far as metabolic syndrome and diabetes is concerned. Here we're going to show that all fat is not bad, and now having too little fat may have so much more in terms of complications and how they can have abnormal behavior. Overplay, which is there with regards to insulin deficiency and insulin resistance between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and the classical paradigm which says that type 1 is insulin deficiency with ketosis in a lean individual versus type 2, which is more of an insulin resistance in a non-ketotic individual, is now going, and there is often an overlap. Now, in between, there are also certain conditions which may be there. And one of that condition is that if you have too little fat, what will happen in terms of perspectives, how the difference is there in terms of their management, in terms of both overlap between type 1 and type 2. And this is what we will talk about a bit in detail. So the topic today is an interesting case of diabetes because of too little fat, which is a recipe for disaster. You can all go and have a look at our website for further information, as well as our courses. We have recently brought our book and the mobile application, which will help in terms of guided management. So we'll right away start off with the case discussion.
A 12-year-old boy, birth of the non-consequential marriage, third by birth order, resident of the Madhya Pradesh, and brought by the parents with the chief complaint of patient having weakness and severe weight loss since 4 to 5 years, and patient having recurrent epistaxis associated with the fever that was on and off in nature, and since it is 4 to 5 years.
Just hold on. So let's start at this point. If you have a child who has a 4 to 5 year history of weight loss along with epistaxis, what do you think of at this point? Because I think what we want to do is that by history, you should be able to really go to the diagnosis and then you can think of later on. So if we talk about severe weight loss and epistaxis, what could be the possible?
Sir, severe weight loss with associated with the epistaxis might be the systemic infection like tuberculosis or other autoimmune causes.
Wouldn't that be a bit too long? 5 years for tuberculosis?
Sir, yes, it is long.
So what could be the other possibility of somebody with failure to thrive, weight loss plus minus and epistaxis?
And recurrent epistaxis could be an autoinflammatory disease.
So like?
So,
Can be.
so SLE can be a cause.
How common does SLE cause just epistaxis and no joint involvement or other things?
Sir, very less likely to considering history, neurological malignancy could be a possibility, but before
Too long. So what about some other like hypertensive condition which will cause epistaxis? That could be one thing. So renal problem could be one thing which you have to think of. So this is a very, very vague presentation, but I think history sometimes may not give you what the examination gives. This was more of an examination case rather than a history case. But anyway, severe weight loss since 4 to 5 years and recurrent epistaxis may indicate some form of infection, chronic disease, or autoimmunity from that perspective. So let's go forward from
there. Detailed history. Child was all right before 5 years. According to father, at the age of 7 years, patient started losing weight in form of the fat, first from the upper limb, then gradually from lower limb trunk, as well as thigh region over that progress over the 2 to 3 years. And after the 2 to 3 years, he started losing fat from the face and neck also. And that took gradually over 6 to 8 months.
Just hold on. So now this is becoming more precise in terms of that. So what he's saying is that, is it predominantly a weight loss or a fat loss?
Sir, according
or did you see the patient and then you start asking in that regard?
Sir, father is typically telling it is generally a fat loss, and because of muscle mass is well preserved in this case.
So yeah, so I think it is very difficult to delineate, because when you see a case like this, often you automatically make a diagnosis and then you start a question, because historically parents may not be able to give you a very, very precise, but if you ask a leading question, then they will say the fat loss is there. So I think this is important that you are saying that there was a pattern which was there in terms of loss of fat. So you are saying that upper limbs were first involved, then you had the lower limb involvement, and then last was the face and neck. Now, what does it tell you? Does it tell you anything? Science.
So judged by the history of fat loss.
Which part, like the progression, why is the face and this thing last to go?
Because of the mechanical fat is more preserved in the fat like period, but it lasts frequent.
If you think of any disorder, let's talk about malnutrition. Which fat is lost first?
Means adipose tissue.
No, which part? Like it is mainly
Trunk-
the
trunk and
the
limbs.
arm. The
Ah.
arm will go first.
Hmm.
Because if you see somebody whose face becomes suppressed and the buccal fat is lost, that's the last fat which go, because that is not that much metabolically active. It is more of a structurally
Hmm.
active. I think we will talk about that part as well. So this pattern also makes difference. So now if you look at the history, now what are you thinking about? Let's go first of all from that.
Sir, according to history, I can say that it is not due to the some infection, because if it is infection.
No. What you were saying is that now weight loss was there, but now it is clear it is fat loss. So your rough diagnosis is a form of
Lipodystrophy.
lipodystrophy. Now, what does this history tell you as to what type of lipodystrophy you're dealing with?
Sir, it is suggestive of started from the limbs and gradually progress over the face. So it could be the generalized pattern.
So what I'm asking is that first of all, congenital is impossible because it is too late.
And the
after
age of
gestation.
onset.
Now, how does partial present? So what is the difference between partial and what involvement?
Sir, if partial, there is two type of partial. Either it is congenital or it is acquired. If congenital is there, then there is a preservation of fat of neck and supraclavicular region. So typically Cushingoid appearance is there. And if patient having the partial lipodystrophy, then at the lower limb fat deposition is there.
I think that's a very, very classical. So if you just now go by this slide, you will get the diagnosis. This is a late onset fat loss which started from the limbs, but is also involving the face. It's also involving the neck. So just by history, now your diagnosis is
Congenital, acquired generalized lipodystrophy.
acquired generalized
Lipodystrophy.
lipodystrophy. This is the most likely thing that you're looking at. Now, this is something which becomes very evident when you look at the child also, but we'll talk about other differentials and everything as well. So please carry on. So I think the pattern becomes very, very important, which you mentioned.
Patient having a recurrent epistaxis of same duration that lasts for 5 to 10 minutes, nasal bleeding stops by itself, no any hospital admission for same cause, or it stops by its home treatment. Patient having normal appetite. Patient having complaint of on and on recurrent fever. Fever was low grade in nature at the frequency of every 4 to 5 days. Since last 4 to 5 days, sometime associated with the cough and cold, and interfebrile periods, child is active and normal. Patient having complaint of polyuria and polydipsia since 1 year, and severe acanthosis and skin rashes since one to 2 years.
How did they give a history of acanthosis?
Sir, it's skin blackening.
So blackening of skin, you have to be more precise. You can't write acanthosis on it. So just hold on. So now you have a child who has lost a lot of subcutaneous fat. And one thing you have found very importantly, there is an on and off history of fever and rash. Now, what does it mean, Simon?
So again, an autoimmune cause of the same.
So if you now club everything, it looks more like a autoimmune disorder, which is causing cutaneous involvement, which is causing systemic response, and you're having this fat loss. So now I think your story is building up on that. And why is this polyuria significant now?
Sir, because of the fact that lipodystrophy can be associated with insulin resistance, so it could be a case of ongoing or form of insulin resistance polycythemia.
So what is the usual onset of diabetes in lipodystrophy? When does it happen?
Sir, it depends upon the which type of the
AGL, you're talking about acute generalized lipodystrophy.
Means mean age of starting diabetes is 8 to 9 years.
No, what I'm trying to say is that from the onset of lipodystrophy, when the fat starts losing, how many
So around
years?
1 or 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
Yes, this is very, very important to understand that diabetes will not happen immediately. It will take 2 to 3 years, depending upon the course that you are having. So that's why this is really fits into exactly into your picture, because he had weight loss 4 or 5 years, polyuria 1 2 years. And would that diabetes be severe, mild, or moderate? How will be the presentation? Will it be like type 1 or type 2?
So type 1 presents to us due to acidosis and ketosis. But here, due to the absence of fat, that will not be present. So it will be mild representation.
So it will not be as severe as compared to type 1. And even osmotic symptoms will not be that much because HbA1c usually is not very high. The presentation, if you think simply that lipodystrophy is the most severe form of type 2 diabetes, that's what they will present like. DK, rarely they can have. Suppose you have got some fat, when you only need mild amount of ketones to produce that, but generally as a rule, as I said, DK will be absent. So this is a classical history. If you go step by step, fever, on and off fever, rash, fat loss, polyuria. So I think now your diagnosis is pretty much that.
Patient having abdominal enlargement since 1 to 2 years. The negative history, no any history of hospital admission for fever or epistaxis or for other illness. No history of diarrhea, tremors, and heat intolerance. No history of any chronic drug intake or any injection. No history of chronic stress, decreased appetite, or dehydration. No history of bone pain and blood transfusion. No history of alopecia, joint pain, joint stiffness, dental problem, and other joint deformity. The patient having no history of chemotherapy and radiotherapy.
I think you have to talk about why are you asking all that. So now we know that this is acquired generalized lipodystrophy. So what are the possible things you want to exclude? You can go one by one.
Sir, first, if we suspect this lipodystrophy, then first we have to rule out the systemic disease. That patient having no history of admission for similar illness like diarrhea, fever, and epistaxis for hospital admission, and then patient having no any history of chronic drug intake.
Which drugs are you talking about?
Sir, mainly chemotherapy related.
What is the most common drug associated with lipodystrophy?
Protease inhibitor.
HIV. So that is the most important thing, that there is no history of HIV drug associated. How is HIV related lipodystrophy different from acquired generalized lipodystrophy?
Sir, in HIV related lipodystrophy, there is typical fat loss from the face, limbs, and the lower limbs, and there is a well preserved fat from the in the trunk region. So we can differentiate from them.
And they can have more of in the back,
like Cushing-Waits
appearance. So I think so you have to specifically say there is no history of any protease, because that is the drug. So when you say drug, you have to talk about what injections are you talking about?
Sir, chronic means.
So no. So what you need to understand is that your history is like every word that you're using in a history is like your currency, your money you're spending. So unnecessarily, if you put things, it will cause confusion, because then you will be asked, why are you asking for that? So it's very important that drug intake is important. You talked about heart and other antiretroviral therapy, that's important, but not just routinely in terms of infection. Diarrhea, tremor, heat intolerance is more for thyrotoxicosis. But how does thyrotoxicosis differ from lipodystrophy?
Sir, there will be more symptomatic manifestations.
And 5 years thyrotoxicosis going on will be 2, like the patient would have become really. So you say, of course, if you talk about somebody who has got weight loss, somebody who has got fever, thyrotoxicosis is a possibility, but 5 years is a bit too long. It is a differential of lipodystrophy, but probably not in this case. And then what will be the pattern? Will you have fat loss in thyrotoxicosis? It will be a generalized
muscle and fat
everything
loss.
will be lost, and more of muscle and fat which will be lost in that regard. Why bone pain in blood transfusion?
Sir, because of some chronic illness like cancer or neoplasm or blood leukemias.
Okay.
That causes the.
So some of those drugs can cause that. So that part is there. So I think if you go, this is more of a negative history that you're taking, but predominantly in this case, it is pretty much very clear. What is very important is your 5th one, alopecia, joint pain, joint stiffness. All those things become very, very important. Okay.
Nutritional history: child taking regular diet, normal appetite, taking 1600 calorie per day, bladder bowel habit is normal.
Now, what do you expect the appetite to be?
Sir, if it is patient having the systemic disease, then appetite should be less. And its appetite should be the normal, or it will increase.
What do you expect?
The appetite will be huge.
Why?
So leptin is the fat secretes leptin.
So if you basically look at it, this is a very confusing picture. You've got a child who has got no subcutaneous fat. If you talk about lipodystrophy, in that situation, you would expect that there will be no leptin. And if you have no leptin, your appetite will be very high. So theoretically, the voracious appetite is what is described as that. What do you expect about their energy levels? Low or high? Activity levels?
So it will be low.
Low.
It will be low due to the leptin. Body perceives it is decreased energy.
What does leptin do to energy expenditure?
It will decrease then. If leptin is there, then energy level will increase.
No.
Leptin deficiency.
Hold on. What does leptin tell you? So when your fat is secreting leptin, body knows that you've got enough amount of energy. So what will it do?
It will expend the energy.
So it will like to spend the energy. So it will decrease the intake as far as that, and then it will cause more of a energy loss which will happen on the sympathetic system. So if you have leptin deficiency, you will have a lot of appetite and you have central hypothyroidism like picture. So it will be more lethargic, not working in that regards. But because of insulin resistance, sometimes they become more hyperactive. That difference is there. But if you talk about this, they will behave more like you are satiated. That sort of a thing will be there. Body doesn't want to spend any more energy from there.
Developmental history. Development is according to age. Immunization history as per the age. Family and socio-economic history, child having 3 siblings, 1 elder brother and elder sister, living in Pakka house, has toilet, and father is head of the family and economic person, belong from lower or socio-economic status, and there is no family history of contact TB, no family history of similar complaint or similar fat loss.
And there is no history of consanguinity. How is consanguinity important here?
Sir, consanguinity for the female for the congenital cause of the lipodystrophy.
So now, if you go by history, summarize your history.
Sir, there is a 12-year-old boy presented because of the fat loss, mainly that was a generalized overall, and there is no familial history suggestive of might be due to this child having lipodystrophy due to the acquired causes, and patient having other symptoms, other insulin resistance and diabetic-like symptoms.
Possibly diabetes and possibly fatty liver, because you said there is an abdominal distension. So this is a classical presentation you will get of lipodystrophy. Now, this, as I discussed, is more of an examination case. We have to go on examination in detail.
Okay. On general examination, child was conscious, alert and active, no any icterus, pallor, cyanosis and edema, loss of the subcutaneous fat from the face, neck, trunk and the extremities, prominent muscles and the superficial vein is visible. Severe patient having severe acanthosis nigricans over the neck and axilla region, skin is dry, coarse, and skin having pigmentation, eczema, having hyperkeratosis and thick hair. Temperature is normal, all vital is normal. Abdominal enlarged, there is enlarged abdomen with the prominent vein. Liver is enlarged inside 5 cm below the costal margin, having the regular margin and firm inconsistency. And spleen is enlarged 4 cm below the costal margin, having the regular margin and firm inconsistency.
So why is there splenomegaly in this case?
Sir, because of the extra fat also deposit to the spleen also, or because of some autoimmune causes.
What do you think?
So, one is what you mentioned, the excess fat. Second can be, sir, a sign of liver failure, portal hypertension causing splenomegaly.
That you have to think of. So I think the important thing is that, of course, hepatomegaly is very common, and we see it maybe even bigger liver than this also. That is more like a fatty liver, which is there. Splenomegaly, you have to start thinking whether there is also extra, something like a portal hypertension which is happening, or it may also happen and then deposition of fat will be there.
But
Now,
child having no history of esophageal varices.
yeah, no history of
Varices or blood in vomiting.
yeah, but how will you know? Splenomegaly may not, doesn't mean that you will have always have hematemesis on it. So that is one thing which will become relevant from that perspective. Now, if you talk about different types of diabetes, type 1, type 2, and lipodystrophy, if you talk about fatty liver, Naveen, which one will have the least likelihood of having fatty liver? Which will have the maximum likelihood of having fatty liver?
Type 1, type 2, lipodystrophy, all three comparisons.
So type 1 will be?
Sir, the fatty liver will be most in case of lipodystrophy and least in case of type 1.
Why?
So type 1 is basically insulin deficiency, but they can also have a form of fatty liver.
How common is fatty liver in type 1 diabetes?
So it is means after the puberty it will move.
So for fatty liver, what is the basis of fatty liver is insulin resistance. If you don't have insulin, so at diagnosis, if you don't have any insulin, you can't have fatty liver. So type 1, theoretically, they say that does not cause fatty liver. Only when you're giving too much insulin or during puberty, because insulin resistance happening, then you can have it. Type 2, of course, can have fatty liver because it's part of it. And lipodystrophy, everybody will have. So I would say one of the most important markers, other than the fat and the other veins, is that you have to look at the liver. So if there is a liver, then this also gives a very strong possibility of lipodystrophy. So I think this is a very important finding which is there. So hepatosplenomegaly, very relevant from
SMR is pre-pubertal. According in general examination, as the first picture showing patient having the acanthosis, severe acanthosis at the axilla region, as well as the neck region with the hyperkeratosis. And second picture is showing that there is a generalized loss of the fat and patient having prominent muscular appearance. And third picture is showing that patient having a severe abdominal enlargement that might be due to the organomegaly, due to the hepato and splenomegaly.
Now, just hold on. So now many of our cases with type 1 come as very malnourished. And there is also an entity called malnutrition related diabetes mellitus. How would you differentiate them clinically from this child?
Sir, according to this picture, this picture is showing patient having generalized fat loss as only fat loss. No, there is prominent muscle, and in this diabetes with the malnutrition, there is a generalized loss of the fat and muscles also. And if we are giving insulin in that patient, to regenesis of the adipose
tissue. Generally, the muscle loss will be more marked compared to the fat loss, because if you have insulin deficiency, what will happen to the muscle? Because it's an anabolic hormone, you will have loss of this thing. What will happen to fat?
It will also lose.
Lipolysis will happen, but it is going to be proportional to the level of amount of insulin deficiency.
And more cyclo.
They would have become ketotic by this time. So this, I think if you look at this child and if you remember this, you will always be able to identify this as a possibility in that perspective.
So, anthropometry, height is 146 centimeter, patient having weight 36 centimeter and BMI 16.8 centimeter. So growth is normal according to age. By the summary, a 12-year-old boy with the atypical appearance, fat loss started around 7 years of age, gradually started from the limbs, over the trunks and faces and neck in this order. Patient having prominent vein and muscle with the hepatosplenomegaly, with patient having chronic fever with recurrent epistaxis since 3 to 4 years, with associated with the polyuria, polydipsia, and severe acanthosis with coarse dry skin, and normal development, growth, and normal genitalia.
So I think this is a very, very classical presentation that you mentioned, and this would clearly suggest a possibility only one diagnosis is there. Now, what do you expect in terms of genitalia? What do you expect in terms of pubertal development in lipodystrophy?
Sir, pubertal development will be the normal or will be the normal because of the leptin deficiency. It will suppress the pubertal development, but because of the insulin resistance and because of the bone accelerated, it will increase.
So both. What is the difference between the overall growth and other parameters in somebody who has got insulin resistance exclusively, like a type A insulin resistance versus lipodystrophy?
So in insulin resistance, growth will be normal. So growth will be on the higher side.
Puberty?
So puberty in case of females, it can be delayed. Due to the excess estrogen buildup and all, they can have.
So in the most severe insulin resistance cases, you will actually have presentation more like hyperandrogenism. And sometimes they will have something like hypertrichosis and very severe progress from there. Here also, lipodystrophy also can cause hyperandrogenism, which is known, but because your leptin is less, that will mitigate some of those problems. So I think you are absolutely right when you say because of leptin deficiency, a puberty is not going that fast. If there was good leptin, their puberty would have gone much faster. They would have been more taller in that perspective. So height may be slightly advanced. So usually the other thing to remember is that height may actually be slightly advanced in this setting, as against other forms of type 1 diabetes where height will also be compromised. So you're carrying. So anthropometry you haven't shown?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Height is 146 centimeter, weight is 36 centimeter, and BMI 16.8 centimeter, 8 kilogram per meter square.
So I think that clearly shows that there is a normal situation overall in that perspective. So now if we go further, how will you now investigate? So now you have a child who looks like that there is a generalized loss of fat, which is recent onset, progressive. There seems to be abdominal involvement. What investigation will you like to do?
Sir, first of all, a patient having acanthosis and generalized ergonomically, first we have to see for we have to ask the history, and after that we have to conclude, and that after that we have to do RBS monitoring, fasting blood sugar postprandial. For the liver part, we have to do SG. We have to see
Now,
the
how will
SGPT.
you first of all confirm that this is lipodystrophy?
First, after the ruling out the other disease and other causes, we have to by the history, by the general examination, and by the physical
So
appearance.
main message is that the diagnosis is largely clinical in this setting. Investigation is mainly done towards
Supportive.
ruling out other things and complications. So what are the investigations which were there?
Sir,
Okay.
diagnosis for patient having most likely probable diagnosis of the generalized lipodystrophy of acquired form, which is most likely due to the autoimmune causes. Investigation, hemoglobin is normal. Total leukocyte count is normal. Platelet is slightly lower side, 50,000. RFT is normal. SGPT is higher side, 183. Protein is at normal level. Albumin is normal. Bilirubin is slightly dearranged. SGOT is higher side, 180, and TTG is negative. Fasting blood sugar is normal, 72 milligram per deciliter. RBS is higher side, 268 milligram per deciliter, and total cholesterol is the higher side with increase the level of triglyceride. LDL, very low level of the HDL, 18.2. LDL is higher side, 28 milligram, and VLDL is higher side, 60 milligram per deciliter.
So basically, what you are showing is quite important. Show the figures. Yeah, don't go. Keep it up. So what you are showing basically is that the SGPT level is on the higher side, but basically along with that, your triglyceride is very high, but cholesterol is not that high. What you are seeing is that your HDL is low. So the classical presentation, the classical things which happen with lipodystrophy is that your triglyceride will be predominantly high and HDL will be low. But LDL levels may not be high. Why? So you are seeing LDL is only 28. So this is what differentiates this dyslipidemia from what you see in obesity or type 2 diabetes.
So probably because of the cholesterol levels.
You are not able to produce cholesterol. You don't have any of the skin fats. So how will that cholesterol come from there? It is mainly a spillage which is happening in terms of the triglyceride, which we are seeing. HDL is also low, but LDL is also on the lower side. VLDL, on the other hand, is on the slightly higher side. Why is that?
So because the VLDL level is depend upon how much free fatty acid in the blood and how much chylomicron in the blood. So if after some time, if fatty acid and chylomicron is increase in the blood, VLDL will increase, but because of the 2 to 3 year, it will exhaust.
So VLDL is basically endogenous.
So VLDL again is more of a calculated measure. And when you actually calculate it, and if a triglyceride level is high, the reliability of VLDL becomes less. Because the ratio of the VLDL, it depends upon, as you were talking on the same thing you're trying to say, is that VLDL is actually derived from all those formulas. So it is not reliable when the TG is on the higher side, because then the ratio is different. So what you're looking from this report is that you have got a high triglyceride and a low HDL, which is a characteristic thing. From the previous slide, you showed that SGPT is high.
Yes.
So this is classical. Now, the second thing that you are seeing is that fasting is 72 and random is high. What does it mean? Science.
So, besides, what about the visceral fat which is being deposited? Maybe the visceral fat is only being prominently deposited on the pancreas. That is why the insulin secretion after meals may be hampered much more in this stage.
So,
No,
do you think this is
very
insulin
advanced
deficiency?
No, not insulin deficiency, but as per the level of resistance, there might be insulin deficiency.
That is, of course, relative insulin deficiency, but why is there such an increase which is
This I
happening?
couldn't explain. The fasting means 72.
Sir, because the patient didn't have that much advanced diabetes. Because
So, if you look at the overall way the diabetes will progress in this setting, is that you will first tend to have more of postprandial hyperglycemia rather than fasting hyperglycemia. Now, that mechanism is got to do with the insulin action also at the level of the liver and other factors. So your hepatic production is not too much, like you don't produce that much. because you don't have that much store to produce, but you are not able to counter the amount of food that you are having in that perspective. So the first thing to happen here would be more that you will have a post-meal hyperglycemia. Now, what happens in type 1 diabetes?
So for type 1 diabetes, there is fasting is affected.
So usually you will have much more fasting hyperglycemia which is happening. Type 2 diabetes?
So type 2 diabetes, postprandial response.
Again, so you will see much more postprandial increase. So this is very, very characteristic. So this is insulin resistant, this sort of a syndrome. The post-meal readings tend to go high. So if you look at these two reports very characteristically, what you're seeing is that high triglyceride, low HDL, high SGPT, a lot of delta gap between fasting and 2-hour value. This is the biochemical hallmark as far as lipodystrophy is concerned. Okay.
In this case, the liver is so enlarged. The primary deposition is happening in the liver, but still the
it is not able to, it's not going to release that much amount of glucose from there. So fasting is going to go high when your glucose production is more. You've got mainly fat there, you don't have much glycogen there. So this glycogen is not going to be released from there.
So according to from the interpretation of the result, patient having lipodystrophy associated with the increase the triglyceride level in the blood and associated with the NAFLD, associated with the autoimmune causes and associated with the diabetes with insulin resistance. So diagnosis revised after the investigation. My probable diagnosis for this patient is acquired generalized lipodystrophy associated with the hypertriglyceridemia and diabetes with the insulin resistance with NAFLD associated due to the autoimmune causes. So plan of management in this patient, first of all, we have to keep the management for the high sugar. We need to start the anti-diabetic drug like the pioglitazone, and if it is sugar is not controlled, then we have to shift to the insulin. NAFLD management by the weight loss, diet management, and the supportive medicine. We have to prescribe the patient to the low fat balanced diet. They typically contain 50 to 60% carbohydrate, 20 to 25% fat, and 25% protein, associated with the statins and vitamin supplements, and plan for the metreleptins for this disease.
So I think this is a very, very important part, an important topic to understand, because lipodystrophy is rare. It is like 1 in a million. So it's not a common disorder that you will see every time going around. So it's a rare disorder. And most cases that I have seen are more either in the newborn period. So when you talk about congenital, they will present very early. Maybe in a few weeks of life also they will present. That will be a differential for neonatal diabetes. And they will present with complete loss of subcutaneous fat. But the most common thing that you as an endocrinologist will see will be this form, the acquired generalized lipodystrophy, in which there is a whole loss. Of course, if somebody has a known history of HIV and treatment, then you will get that. That won't be a difficult issue. So this is a very, very interesting and a rare disorder in which the pathophysiology is very interesting. So clinically, although it is rare, it is very relevant from a clinical perspective to understand the pathophysiology. Now, what we need to understand that all the mesenchymal tissues, whether it is a chondrocyte, the osteoblast, the myoblast, and the adipocyte, they all derive from the same stem cell. And from this stem cell, you've got the development which happens of different parts, and this process controls the development from there. So the WNT pathway is central for a lot of these mesenchymal tissues. We discussed it about in bone. We discussed about it in the setting of ovarian development as well. This converts it into a pre-adipocyte. The pre-adipocyte is then converted into by regulation of multiple factors, which include the BSCL2, AKT2, and PPAR gamma. Now, where is AKT2 come from? Have you heard of AKT2? So it is actually a downstream of the insulin pathway. So endocrine control is mainly through insulin, IGF-1, and glucocorticoid. These factors control the conversion of a pre-adipocyte to adipocyte. Now, if you have a problem here, if you don't have an insulin, if the insulin is not working, you have an AKT2 problem. If you have an IGF-1 deficiency or a steroid problem, they will also all result in a problem in terms of conversion of pre-adipocyte to adipocyte. If you can't develop adipocyte, you will develop what looks like a lipodystrophy. One of the most important genes here is the BSCL2, and this is what is known as the one responsible for the congenital generalized lipodystrophy type 2. It is the most severe form. It is controlling the entire pathway. Now from here, this adipocyte is converted to a mature adipocyte using 3 genes, the AGPAT2, PTRF and CAV1. You don't need to understand and remember all of them, but these are involved in maturation of this adipocyte. So this adipocyte then matures into an adult form, and from there all the actions of adipocyte, leptin production, sensation and all those things come into the picture. So defects in any of these will result in a lipodystrophy, which we'll discuss. Now PPAR gamma is also very relevant because this is a site of action for thiazolidinediones, and that gives a bit of, you talked about pioglitazone as an option to treat, would be one of the drugs which can act from that perspective. Now from here, this mature adipocyte of course undergoes apoptosis, and this process is regulated by a lamin A and lamin C genes, which are again involved in the pathogenesis of a partial lipodystrophy. So if you look at it, there are multiple genes and multiple endocrine factors which are involved in the overall process of lipid development, and defects in any of them will result in an abnormality which is there. Now, the other thing to remember is that the same stem cell as discussed develops the chondrocyte using SOX9, develops the muscle using MyoD, as well as a RUNX pathway which develops the osteoblast. And there is a dynamic flux which is happening. And when we will discuss bone, we'll discuss about that if you do a lot of exercise, your bone can actually become fat. If you do less exercise, your stem cell will go more towards fat. So this is like a process which can be changed also. And PPAR gamma actually shunts these stem cells towards the adipocyte. So that's why you will have more adipogenesis, which will happen from that perspective. Now, any of these defects, whether you have a problem at the level of BACL2, which is the most important, AGPAT2, which is the second important cause, will cause reduced amount of mature adipocyte, and you will have features of what is discussed as lipodystrophy from that perspective. So AGPAT2 is what is known as the CGL1, which is congenital generalized lipodystrophy. This is a moderate disease. It is not that severe, but it tends to progress over time. Defects in BACL2 will cause what is known as CGL2, the most severe form. This is usually going to have a lot of diabetes problems, and even mortality can happen early in this setting. PTRF is an interesting one. It is involved in the overall development of the caveoli. So in the adipocyte, there is a caveoli region which allows the fat to enter, and it allows the fat to accumulate. Problems there will cause a rare form of congenital generalized lipodystrophy, and CAV1 is actually controlling the caveoli development. It is again CGL4. So any abnormality there will have a problem in that perspective, which you will identify from there. Now, what are the problems which happen if you have too little fat? We all know that if you have too much fat, you have got leptin. What happens to the leptin there?
So if you have too much fat, the leptin will be high.
Leptin resistance and insulin resistance. So this is the other way around. You have got leptin deficiency and insulin resistance. So this is the most extreme form. Now, what basically leptin does? We all know that leptin is produced by the fat, and it acts at multiple levels. It directly has an effect on the central center. It goes there and it tells, okay, we've got enough food. So we want the anorexic signals to go up and the orexogenic signals to go down. So there is a satiety which is there because of an anorexic effect. Then the same leptin will also go via the sympathetic nervous system to go and say, okay, we've got too much this thing, energy expenditure should also increase in that perspective. So if you have leptin deficiency in this setting, you will be very hungry. Your appetite will keep on going and you will not spend energy. You will like to lie down and sleep. But these people have a voracious appetite, as I said, but they also tend to be hyperactive. And that hyperactivity is not because of leptin. That is probably because of the insulin effect and other factors which are relevant from that perspective. So leptin has got multiple effects, and it also going to affect your thyroid function. So if you've got leptin deficiency, growth hormone will come down, TSH will come down. If you have leptin deficiency, the pubertal development will also be affected because the KNDY neuron is also affected by that. And of course, there will also be a direct effect. So leptin deficiency in this setting is explaining your voracious appetite. your delayed puberty, which is counteracted by hyperinsulinism, and growth, which is also counteracted by hyperinsulinism in that perspective. So these are the factors which you see from that regard. So activity and those parameters would be affected. Now, what about insulin resistance? Now, normally we always talk about partitioning hypothesis, in that there is an amount of fat that the body can store in the subcutaneous region, and then whatever extra is there would be deposited in the liver or the visceral tissue. So now what happens in lipodystrophy is that you don't have that store. You can't even store a single gram of extra fat. So all the fat that you eat will go on to get deposited in the visceral tissue. So this extra amount of fat will first of all go in the blood, and that's why you have got hypertriglyceridemia. Then it will go into the liver, in the pancreas, in the kidneys, even in the bones and the ovaries. So it is going to be deposited everywhere in the body, and that's why you have got hepatosplenomegaly. If you look at the pancreas also, there will be fat. How much pancreatic fat do you need to lose to reverse diabetes? 10 grams. So if you remove 10 grams of pancreatic fat, type 2 diabetes will reverse. But how much weight loss is required for that? It is 15%. So 10 gram of pancreatic fat is actually going to cause so much problem. So if you can imagine, if you have excessive fat going there, what is going to happen with this regards? So visceral adiposity there is going to cause fatty liver, and that's what you saw. Your SGPT levels were sky high. There was also splenomegaly, so I will be a bit worried about the possibility of portal hypertension developing in that perspective. And then insulin is not going to work. If you have insulin resistance, then you will of course have type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovaries or hyperandrogenism, which will happen, hypertension, dyslipidemia will happen, and you will have other issues like rapid growth. But this rapid growth, leptin deficiency. Leptin is decreasing growth hormone. What is insulin doing to growth hormone? Or what is obesity doing to growth hormone?
Sir, it is basically, there will be increased sensitivity in case of.
So growth hormone level will be low, but IGF-1 will be high. So even your growth hormone is low, insulin is pushing, so it will be a normal growth which will happen in that regards. Hyperandrogenism we already discussed, and high triglyceride will happen because of leak of all these substances from that perspective. So now if we look at what lipodystrophy basically is, we now know is a problem. Lipo means fat and dystrophy means abnormalities or whatever, disorders. So it's like a disorder in the adipose tissue. Now this could be generalized, in which the whole body is affected, or it could be partial. Generalized could be because of, as we discussed about the 4 key genes. You don't need to remember everything. BSCL is the most important, the most severe form. AGPAT2 is a milder form which is there. And acquired is basically, if you think about it, if you have seen many patients who will have some lump which happens, painful swelling which happens in the axilla. This is a common finding you will have heard of. And then that area, the fat goes off. This is known as panniculitis. So AGL is actually a generalized panniculitis, to say in a very simple terms. There is in fact initial inflammation which is there, and after that the fat cells die. This is what happens. And this usually happens in the setting of either an infection. So infection will trigger antibodies against these adipocytes, or you may have autoimmune disorder, which is then triggering the immune response. So it's more like an immune reaction in which there is a generalized loss as far as the subcutaneous fat is concerned. And when we talk about diabetes, we are mainly talking about this form. Of course, these will be differentials of neonatal, very, very rare. We will not see many, but this you can see definitely. So you need to be aware about that. Partial come more with metabolic problems. They usually do not develop diabetes in children. They will be older individuals. They will have some areas which will look, so sometimes they will look like Cushing-White appearance, because they will have more fat in the neck and the supra area, and the muscles will be less. So they will have lesser fat in the hand and feet. So they will have that Cushing-White appearance rarely. And acquired immune mediated or HIV treatment mediated would be the various causes. So these are the various forms.
One is familiar or due to the genetical causes. Second is acquired, or third is a localized cause. Genetical or familiar cause having two variety: congenital associated, generalized associated, or partially associated. Generalized familiar lipodystrophy having more severity and having more metabolic side effect than the familiar type. Familiar having two variety: Dunningen's variety, Kobling's variety, and third is very less common. There is a mandibular dysplasia variety. In acquired form, there is a again generalized form of the fat loss or the acquired form of the fat loss. Acquired generalized lipodystrophy it is a Lorentz syndrome, and partial acquired lipodystrophy is Barak-Simon syndrome. Localized lipodystrophy due to the drug induced by the pressure induced or paniculitis varieties as previously discussed, or most of the cause due to the idiopathic causes. So let's see the congenital generalized lipodystrophy. As according to in this patient, a picture is showing a patient having generalized fat loss as well as the prominent muscle with the abdominal enlargement, picture showing umbilical hernia, and patient having mild acromegaloid features like the giant big size of the mandible, and there is an increased size of the limbs.
Why do they have acromegaly?
Sir, because of the it present early in the.
So why is the IGF-1 high?
Because the
Severe insulin resistance.
So if your insulin resistance is there, then
So the binding protein will come down and free
IGF-BP1 will go down and free IGF-1 will be high. So they will have that presentation.
It is mainly autosomal recessive association. Patient having absent of the adipose tissue from the birth and having the muscular loop. So the time of onset is very important. In this patient, time of onset is from the birth or within the 3 year of the 3 year of the age, childhood, accelerated growth, and BMR. Patient develop voracious appetite. Because of that, severity is increased. Early and severe metabolic complication associated with the chylomicronemia. Due to the excessive fat deposition, it also deposit into the skin, mainly the extensor surface, that cause eruptive xanthoma and having the acute pancreatitis at the early stage. Women after the prepubertal develop a clitoromegaly and PCOS. Men having normal reproductive potential. In this patient, metabolically active adipose tissue absent. Metabolically active adipose tissue that present beneath the skin that work as a storage, and for the insulation it is absent, and mechanical adipose tissue that present in the sole and the supraorbital in the periorbital region, it is well preserved. Second variety, familiar partial lipodystrophy. As in this picture it is showing, there is a fat loss. There is a fat loss below the neck region, and there is a fat deposition at the face, neck, and the supraclavicular region with the genitomegaly. It is a condition associated with the autosomal dominant inheritance. Patient is normal till the childhood, but as the fat loss start around the puberty, and as picture is showing, patient having double chin, down faces, and excessive supraclavicular fat, variable amount of the fat loss from the trunk. It is patient having metabolic syndromes like acanthosis nigricans, liver, NFLD, and PCOD is very less common than the generalized variety. More reported in the female and missed in the male. In this patient, mechanical adipose tissue is well preserved, and metabolic complications start after the 20 year of age. So it is a less severe variety than the congenital.
These are not something which we will see commonly in adolescent practice. So mainly we'll see the next one that you're talking about is the acquired generalized lipodystrophy.
So acquired generalized lipodystrophy, as we discussed in our patient having generalized fat loss with the abdominal enlargement, with there is a loss of the tissue, adipose tissue from the sole and the palm also. There is a 5 major criteria for the diagnosis. Patient should have generalized fat loss, insulin resistance with the diabetes, no ketosis because of the lack of the fat, elevated BMR, and severe hyperlipidemia with the hepatomegaly. So,
Our child had
sir, patient having the generalized
all of them.
all of them.
So it's very, very clear in this.
So all the acquired form of the lipodystrophy is more common in the women than the men. Typical onset of the onset during the childhood and the adolescent, and fat loss present also in fat and also in the palm and sole region, mainly associated with the autoimmune causes. According to causes, we can divide into three main category. One is due to the paniculitis associated, that is that associated with the 25% cause, autoimmune causes, and idiopathic causes.
So idiopathic causes are basically not causes. So matlab, it is basically, essentially it's a fat destruction. So paniculitis is also fat destruction. What they're trying to say that 25% cases you can find out in the etiology. Often the etiology is not known, but what you should think it of with like is a post-infectious autoimmune response. Like we see Bell's palsy, like we see AIDP, like we see many of these transverse myelitis, they're all immune responses after infection. Same, this infection will trigger an immune response. Now, there may be other immune disorders also in one quarter. That is important. 75% will not have any other this thing. Now, when you say paniculitis, there will be swelling. So they would have history of saying that they were the pain and swelling. Still, the cause is not known, but they will present more with pain in that regard.
Acquired partial lipodystrophy, as in picture is showing, a patient having generalized fat loss in the face area, extremities, and the chest and neck area, but there is a fat deposition on the lower limb. So it is again 3 times more in women. Onset before the medial age of the 8th year, and typically cephalocaudal pattern of the fat loss is present with preserved hip and lower extremities fat. 1/3 of patient of the acquired partial lipodystrophy develop the mesenteroproliferative glomerulonephritis, and 40% of these mostly associated with the autoimmune causes. If we do serum L3 level, there is a low serum C3 level because of the activation of the alternative complementary pathway, and this patient is less severe than the another variety.
If you just look at this aspect, is that this is clearly as compared to the acquired one, this individual has got much more lower limb involvement, is normal. So in our case, we saw it started from hand, but it also went on to the feet. So that is very classical. So if you see, you will be able to identify. What is the percentage of diabetes which will happen in this case?
So it is very less. It start after the 20 to 30 year, and it is around the 15 to 20%.
So if you talk about somebody coming to you with a predominant dyslipidemia, with a predominant diabetes, with a later onset, this is 100% acquired generalized lipodystrophy. That's what we are trying to say from that perspective.
So let's discuss about the localized lipodystrophy. As we discussed previously, it might be due to the paniculitis or any skin infection. Second is HIV related, that can be associated with the partial or generalized due to the mainly protease inhibitor. Due to the pressure lipodystrophy, due to the continuous pressure of the thigh against the wash bowel, it can be the present, and due to the some injections and due to the drug.
Which is the most common drug? You said it is antiretroviral drug. Which is the second most common drug causing lipodystrophy?
So insulin injection.
Insulin. So I think that is something which you should understand, that insulin also causes lipodystrophy. Okay.
So diagnosis, how we have to diagnose about the lipodystrophy. Diagnosis of the lipodystrophy mainly on the history basis, physical examination, and according to body composition examination. That diagnosis supported by the DEXA and the MRI pattern of the fat losses. If we suspected congenital lipodystrophy, then genetic testing is recommended, and autoimmune workup serum complement level is will help in the diagnosis of the acquired lipodystrophy. Serum leptin level having no role, as there is no standard of the serum leptin level according to age, sex, and the stages of the life. So what is the lipodystrophy? It is a rare heterogeneous disorder due to the deficiency of the adipose tissue in absence of the any cause of the malnutrition like the anorexia nervosa or any malnutrition, and the absence of the disease that causes the catabolic state like tuberculosis or adrenal crisis, thyrotoxicosis, and other systemic disorder. That cause potential side effect like the diabetes with insulin resistance, that cause fat deposition into the liver, that cause NFLD and cirrhosis of the liver, and that extra fat deposited into the blood vessel that cause hyperlipidemia, and that cause cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. So I think that is pretty important from that perspective, that we've discussed a different aspect about the lipodystrophy from that perspective. We'll quickly go on to approach, I think, from that perspective. I think the first thing we need to remember is that when should we suspect lipodystrophy as a cause of diabetes? Because for an endocrinologist, patient will not come with lipodystrophy. They will come to us with other complaints. So any patient with diabetes who looks lean and who has got loss of fat, you think of lipodystrophy. But I'll show you one paper that there is a generalized tendency of having a lipodystrophy-like phenotype. If you talk about metabolically healthy obesity, we talk about metabolically healthy obesity, there are also metabolically unhealthy lean individuals. So individuals who are lean, but yet they develop fatty liver, yet they develop PCOS, yet they develop type 2. So which marker is, would you think, what will happen? What is the problem in them? Why are we having metabolically unhealthy lean individuals? MUL, not MHO. MHO is opposite of that.
Due to the genetic.
What is the problem? They have a partial lipodystrophy phenotype. Their skin fat is less. And studies have shown that if your leg fat is less, if you look at DEXA and you see your leg fat, if it is less, you are more likely to develop complications. So while we say lipodystrophy as a disease is rare, lipodystrophy as a cause. So many of our Indian phenotypes will have less leg fat. And that's why they will be at lower fat, they will have much more in the liver. That's pretty much like lipodystrophy. So now if you talk about somebody who comes to you with the conditions you talked about is to exclude HIV, progeria. Now progeria is something premature aging, that will be evident. And HIV treatment is important. Then you look at the extent. And if the extent is generalized, how do you differentiate between congenital and acquired?
At the time of onset, before the 1 year of age, it is a congenital. If it is after the 1 year of age and it is autoimmune associated, then it is due to the acquired causes.
So if you have onset less than 1 year and there is a family history, this looks more like congenital. Otherwise, look for a classical history of inflammation. If there is a history of inflammation. So congenital will not have inflammation. That is already because the fat was never made. So how will you have inflammation? Here the problem is that if you have history of pain in the skin and other nodules developed or rash developed, that is more like acquired. But if it is not there, you can still think of congenital, even if the onset is beyond 1 year. But whatever rare cases I have seen, they are also already within a few weeks of life from there. Now, if it is partial and childhood onset with inflammatory signs, it is very clearly an inflammatory that you discussed about, and you have to rule out MPGN as a possibility. If it is not, then what will you think of?
So if it is not, then we have to see for familiar partial.
So you have to look at whether the upper limb involvement is there or not, then it becomes familial or a acquired partial lipodystrophy. So I think pattern becomes very important, and then of course localized is not really what we're talking about. So most important from our perspective will be the generalized. And if you have a differential of neonatal, think of congenital. Differential of type 1, think of an acquired lipodystrophy. There is no clear-cut diagnostic test which will tell you that this is lipodystrophy. Leptin levels are not reliable, as you said, because they may be low, normal, or high. The only thing which we can do is look at DEXA and see how less is the fat. But type 1 also sometimes we have 5%, 8% fat we have seen. So it is mainly clinical. How much is the muscle and how much is the fat? So I think we'll move forward from there about the options of management. Now, out of the various drugs that we are used in terms of treatment, the most likely which can help out is the TZDs, which will actually be able to increase the peripheral sensitivity as well as the adipogenic potential. Metformin you can use, but then there can be GI side effects. If the SGPT is very high, his SGPT was 180. So then it becomes a relative issue whether you can use metformin or not. And insulin, of course, may be required, but the requirement may be huge. Mainly, it will be nutritional pattern, which is there. So we'll now invite, and the other option, of course, the final option is whether to replace leptin. Now, what you need to understand that while leptin is a specific therapy in the condition, leptin deficiency is not the overall factor in lipodystrophy. There are other factors which are also there. So you need to understand the overall treatment, and we'll invite Dr. Sayan to talk about the treatment options in this perspective.
Manoj discussed was an acquired case of generalized lipodystrophy. Now, what does history show us? The first case of acquired generalized lipodystrophy was told to us in the year of 1944. And this was the physician. He was the in charge of the diabetic department at King's George Hospital, London. And this was the diagnostic criteria he presented to us at that point of time. As already mentioned by Dr. Manoj, it was generalized absence of fat, insulin resistance diabetes mellitus, absence of ketosis, elevated BMR, severe hyperlipidemia with subsequent hepatomegaly. But there was this line with which he ended his paper. This was that even after making the diagnosis, he ended on a note of unsatisfied curiosity, because there was no treatment available for this condition which he just diagnosed at that point of time. So I'll start from this and I'll tell you all the available options at this point of time to treat this condition. So coming to the management of lipodystrophy, diet remains the cornerstone. But studies or randomized control trials regarding the same are very lacking. As already has been said, these patients are generally hyperphagic. So there has to be a balance which has to be maintained between overfeeding, because the child is malnourished, has lower weight, so the family will want weight gain. But overfeeding can also cause metabolic complications. So the balance has to be between overfeeding and underfeeding to prevent metabolic complications. Now, what is the dietary advice which we will give? A dietary advice which will be normal, which will have around 50 to 60% carbohydrates, not less than that, 20% of proteins, and 20 to 30% of fats.
What type of fat?
So in type of fats, we'll specifically tell them not to take saturated fats. Second, trans fats completely avoid. So what are the types of fats they can take or we'll prefer is omega-3 fatty acids. Now, where will they get it from? They'll get it from mainly fish oil capsules are generally present now. If the child is a non-vegetarian, he can take salmon fish or tuna fish. And along with that, vegetable oils contain omega-3 fatty acids. So this will be my dietary advice to the patient. And as with any other case of diabetes, we'll tell him to avoid simple carbohydrates, to avoid rapid rise in sugar levels. So we'll advise in this case to have complex carbohydrates which low glycemic index, which will be evenly distributed and will be combined with protein and fat to further decrease the glycemic index. And along with that, in any child which we advise dietary restrictions, we'll also combine it with physical exercise advice. Now, again, coming to this paper of Dr. Lawrence in the year 1944, what he said that the lipemia was independent of dietary fat. Even after restriction of dietary fat to his patient, he found that the lipemia persisted. So what was the cause? It was directly dependent on the blood sugar. So the more the blood sugar rise, it will be automatically converted to lipids, and the level of hyperlipidemia will be uncontrolled.
Which means that there is a lot of insulin resistance.
Yes.
If you get the insulin resistance down, both the things.
Yes.
Come
Yes. So this is what he exactly suggested. Mainly the action of insulin was impaired, and this was causing the sugar to get converted to fat. Now, coming to the point of insulin resistance, how can we manage these cases of insulin resistance? We might give insulin, but it is required in very, very high doses. The patient which Dr. Lawrence treated had an insulin requirement of 200 units per day. So extreme insulin resistance may not even respond. Now, coming to the second issue, sir already just mentioned, metformin may be tried in cases of insulin resistance. The paper which I have quoted here, they have tried in cases of partial lipodystrophy. So evidence regarding generalized lipodystrophy and metformin is not quite available at this point of time. So coming to the next point, the child doesn't have fat. So is there any oral hypoglycemic agent which will increase the fat? So this was the evidence which the scientists worked upon, leading to this study in the year of 2000, which tried to find out the efficacy and safety of troglitazone in the treatment of lipodystrophy disorders. This was on the background presuming that troglitazone promotes adipocyte differentiation and increases insulin sensitivity, the objective was to determine whether troglitazone ameliorates hyperglycemia and hypertriglyceridemia or increases fat mass. So these three were the primary objectives. So how did they intervene? They gave 6 months of therapy with troglitazone with 200 to 600 milligrams per day. This study had only one pediatric patient who was 6 years of age. That child was given 100 milligrams per day of troglitazone. So what did the study find? The study found that the HbA1c reduced by 2.8%. The fasting triglycerides reduced by 230 milligrams per deciliter. And the body fat increased by 2.4%. Now the body fat has increased. That's a good takeaway from this study. But did the body fat increase in the subcutaneous region or directly in the visceral region? The MRI in this case showed that the increase in body fat occurred in the subcutaneous adipose tissue, which is a plus for us, but not in the visceral fat. One thing in this study is that 80% patients were of partial lipodystrophy cases. So when you go back and read the evidence regarding pioglitazone in generalized lipodystrophy, you won't find such. Not because that you can't give the drug in generalized lipodystrophy, but that just studies haven't been done on the same.
No, the other big issue is that if you don't have any fat cells,
Yes,
how
sir.
will they grow?
So,
If all the cells are gone, then how will it will be very difficult for them to grow again in acquired generalized.
so, but even in this study, in the 5 patients who had generalized lipodystrophy, they also showed a fat gain.
So the response is not as good as 2.8%, generally speaking. That's what
They
we
haven't
have
given the
seen.
classification.
Yeah, so we don't see that much response. That is because they have very limited amount of potential to grow. So that's why if you intervene early, that is the whole point. If you pick the disease early and you intervene, you may be better off because then some of the cells are remaining. But then again, these cells may keep on dying over time because there is an autoimmune process going on. So it's a difficult disease to treat. And my experience with pioglitazone has not been this good because they have got a lot of generalized patients here, partial patients here. That is why they are getting more good response in that. And when you say 2.4%, it means it is 2.4% of the total fat, or it is like 28 to 30%. What do you mean by 2.4%?
So the total fat, which was there present at.
So let's say they had 20 kilograms of fat, this increased by 2.4%.
No, sir. The percentage of fat in the body.
That is a different thing.
So, and the percentage of fat in generalized and partial were hugely dissimilar.
Yes.
Like the generalized in these cases at 7 to 11%
So
fat.
you want to say that from 7 it became 9.9 something.
Huh.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, as Sir just mentioned, is that adipose tissue is an endocrine organ. So people not having an adipose tissue will have deficiency of leptin. So this was the concept with which doctors tried to replace leptin and see what effects it has on these patients. Now leptin is secreted from fat cells. It acts directly on the brain to decrease the hyperphagia in these patients. It also leads to increased resting energy expenditure. It also has been seen that it decreases endogenous hepatic glucose output. And finally, due to the increased energy expenditure, muscle insulin sensitivity will also improve and thereby leading to decreased glucose in the blood. So this was the preliminary thought behind investigating the role of leptin in these patients. Now, this plan was first implemented in a mouse model with generalized lipodystrophy, and after positive results from this claim, it was implemented in human models. Now, what did this study find? This was from the paper of effects of metroliptin in pediatric patients with lipodystrophy. It had 53 patients between 6 months to 18 years of age with lipodystrophy and at least one metabolic abnormality. What was the intervention? The intervention was subcutaneous metroliptin injections. And how was the main outcome determined? Outcome was determined by the changes in HbA1c along with lipid and transaminases levels after a mean duration of 1 year. Now, these were the parameters at baseline, and this is how it followed up after 12 months. On an average, you can see all the parameters have improved right from glucose, triglycerides, and all the lipid parameters along with liver transaminases. Now, what was the difference between, now the 6 months to 18 years was a long cohort. How does a less than 12-year-old and a pubertal child compared in this study? Now, as you can see in the less than 12-year-old group, improvements were there. But when you compare it with the pubertal children, you see a drastic improvement. All the pubertal children drastically improved except for the parameters of liver transaminases.
So why is this?
So
because
only,
they were more effective.
Yes, sir. Only congenital.
No. If your baseline is high, you will have better response.
Yes, sir.
The triglyceride is only 228,
Yes,
so it became 177. That was 556, that becomes 226. Because your baseline was high, this is the treatment effect. If your baseline is high, it will pull it down. But what we need to compare is that despite treatment, you say a lot of responses there, they are still worse as compared to pre-pubertal.
Yes, sir.
They were 7.1 and 5.6.
So except for this parameter.
Liver parameter,
Yeah.
which maybe because of sample size and everything.
So
But
this
what
I
they
thought
tried-
was that these are congenital cases, and for a long duration of time, maybe more severe liver is being affected first. So this was.
That will be clear.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that leptin is going to mainly act at the level of probably insulin sensitization and other things. Liver may be a mechanical thing also. A lot of fat is going on that will be there. But what we are seeing is that after puberty, anyway, insulin resistance worsens. And that's why, despite giving leptin, there was not that improvement. There's a definite improvement, but not that much.
So coming to the question of leptin replacement therapy. Now this is available by the name of Myalept, has 11.3 milligrams per vial. It is the only drug specifically approved for lipodystrophy. There is no age limit for initiation, can be started right from 6 months of age. Now, this will cause increased insulin sensitivity. So reduce insulin by 50% at initiation. Dose change will be every 3 to 6 months according to the biochemical parameters. The side effects are generally hypoglycemia and weight loss. Now, what are the dosing? The dosing recommendations are right here. For a male patient and the female patient, both are different. So you will generally start around 0.06 milligrams per kg per day and then follow up. Now, coming to the FDA approval statement, what does it state? It tells us. The FDA statement, even after approving of this drug, tells us that it has a risk of T-cell lymphoma, along with development of anti-metroliptin antibodies, which will decrease the effect of leptin on these patients.
So how does leptin work? What receptor does leptin work on?
So, I forgot the gene. Something lep.
No. What is the type of receptor?
So, insulin.
Insulin is IGF-1.
No.
It is like a growth hormone. It is like a
Cytokine.
growth promoting. So that's why there is a risk of malignancies there. So you have to be a bit cautious in that regard. So yeah, carry on.
Now, when do you have to check for anti-metroliptin antibodies? Only when there are severe cases of infection. It is only approved by the FDA for generalized lipodystrophy. And it is available only through this program known by the name of Myalept REMS program.
This is basically a risk mitigation program. It means it's not approved for everybody. You can't use it. If you have to use in US, you have to enroll in this research program. And it is more like an experimental. You have to get all the data from there. And that's why we can't just think that leptin is the final answer. In most cases, there are other issues to look into as well.
Now, coming to the question of metroliptin in India. Metroliptin is not directly available, has to be imported by certain drug houses. Now, what is the cost? The cost per vial comes to around 2 to 2.5 lakhs. So huge. Its cost is
how
huge.
much will be a monthly cost?
So I was 20,000 per 10 days, I think. The cost will be around 20,000 per 10 days. So 80,000 per month. Now, coming to the question of if we compare type 1, type 2 and lipodystrophy, what are the things we derive from the same? Now in type 1, we tell them to maintain a healthy diet, take regular physical activity, maintain normal weight. The insulin dose is on an average of 1 units per kg per day, no role of metformin, any pioglitazone or leptin. In cases of type 2, again, healthy diet, regular exercise, we advise them weight loss. The insulin dose is on the lower side. If we choose to give them, metformin has been approved in these cases, no role of any other drugs in this case. When comparing these two with lipodystrophy, we should specifically tell them to go for a fat restricted diet. Activity is regular in all cases. Weight gain and weight loss is again questionable in cases of lipodystrophy, as I just mentioned. The insulin dose, if you give it to them, is very, very high. And again, as we just mentioned and discussed, the role of all other drugs haven't been proved. We are specifically looking into each of them, even at this point of time.
So I think that was a very wonderful discussion by both Manoj and Sayan, looking into different aspects of lipodystrophy. The key message is that if you have a child who looks very lean, who looks muscular, who has got prominent veins, and who has mild form of diabetes, which is non-ketotic, start thinking of a lipodystrophy as a possibility. You have to think of possibility of other immune associations, so a basic workup will be required. And then you can consider treatment with pioglitazone versus leptin, which is not easily available in that setting. So I think this was a good discussion. I'll just highlighting this paper, which was a very interesting study from Germany, which really looked into the explanatory factors for metabolically unhealthy lean individuals. And what they found was that if you have a normal weight individual who was lean and who has metabolically unhealthy, leg fat mass will be the most important factor. So what they're trying to say is that there is a lipodystrophy like phenotype which is there. So if you have a child who's developing type 2 diabetes and who's not that obese, think of the leg mass, whether it is less or not. So he might actually have a milder form of lipodystrophy, and maybe pioglitazone may be a good option in that setting. So you have to think about that in that perspective. Metformin again will not be very important in that regard. So I think we'll conclude that. You all can have a look at our website regarding the issues. We'll have a few questions which are there. We have got Dr. Mudita. Could it be HIV related? So usually it is HIV treatment, but yes, HIV itself can cause that. So this was not that in this case. Portal hypertension can lead to platelets and epistaxis. This is a very important point, Dr. Savar, that you can have portal hypertension, which can explain splenomegaly, epistaxis, and other parameters. How to start pioglitazone in such a small child? Any safety issues, monitoring required? It is basically a difficult choice, but then we have to start off some treatment in that perspective. There are some studies in which it has been used in younger children also. So we have started from around 15 milligrams in this setting, and it's generally a very safe drug. We have to monitor the liver functions and they tend to improve. So can pios be given at a SGPT of 185? So what we need to understand is that pioglitazone is not really contraindicated in this setting. And the SGPT, which is high, will actually improve when you give pioglitazone because of the mechanism, the way the child is actually behaving in that perspective. So in fact, if you talk about the drugs which were used for reversal as far as diabetes is concerned, even for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, it was pioglitazone. The main concern with pioglitazone was weight gain, was adipose tissue gain, was edema. Now, all of this may not be that harmful in this child. If he gains weight, we will not be that unhappy. If he develops more fat, we'll actually be happy. So in a way, if you look at the overall perspective, this will be a reasonable option to go for. What else can we use? Insulin at this stage will be required, will be huge, and his fasting is normal, low. So he will have a risk of hypoglycemia development. So that's why I would say the safest option here will be pioglitazone to go in that perspective. There are a few on the question answer as well. Okay, Dr. Adelaide is asking about the effect of leptin on growth hormone. So this is important to understand that leptin will actually have an overall effect as far as growth is concerned, and it will also promote from that perspective the growth hormone responsiveness. If you got more leptin, your growth hormone response will go bigger. Thin people are tall in height. How can you explain this, knowing that they don't have sufficient leptin, the cause of patient of anorexia nervosa? So there are other factors also, Dr. Adelaide, which has to be looked at in terms of thin people being tall. It is not necessarily true, but definitely from a pediatric perspective, if somebody is obese, they will have higher level of IGF-1 despite having a low growth hormone, and that's why they tend to be more tall. Can metformin help in the setting of lipodystrophic diabetes? Yes, if you don't have that much amount of liver dysfunction, you can give metformin. The treatment is pretty much, people say that it's just like treating any other form of diabetes. So you can give metformin, but I would be cautious in this setting with SGPT and liver enzymes being very, very high. Now the lean limbs basically indicate, Dr. Adley, that you have got lesser amount of fat which is there in those limbs. So in lipodystrophy, you've got those lean limbs. Similarly, if you have got lesser amount of leg fat, it would mean that you also have less storage capacity, and all the extra fat goes to the liver, and that's why the risk of diabetes is there.